This is a microphone test. My name is Zach, and I'm testing this microphone. I don't know how to count to 1, 2, 3, so I'm saying words.
I'm now working with children of the children that I've
Yes.
So it's starting to catch up with me. I'm starting to realize that I've been doing this for a while.
You don't look old enough to have great-grandchildren. You have grandchildren, and now you have great-grandchildren.
No, make this one. I can hear you.
Oh,
She's playing with the mic.
what do I do?
That was the first strike, and when people started getting.
Are we supposed to be on audio?
No, legislature.
They're hearing her.
Here I'm discussing her great-grandchildren.
We're discussing
So
her.
the whole audience.
That's all right. I have pictures. I'll show them later.
I was lucky. My oldest granddaughter, when she was about 15, I told her that I would like her someday to have.
Good morning. Good morning. Happy Sunday of EduCon. Thank you. I hope you've enjoyed the conversations in and out of sessions so far. We love that you come to Philadelphia to see our school in action. Hosting this conference really is a labor of love throughout the entire SLA community. I'd like to begin this morning by thanking the folks who make all of this possible, beginning with Z Driggers, our incredible home and school coordinator, and all of the SLA parents you have seen who are volunteering their weekend hours to be here. A huge shout out goes out to Kevin Bowser and Ella Burrows, the student co-chairs for this conference, and the countless other students for all of their hard work. Many thanks, yes. Many thanks to Marcy Hull, Doug Herman, and the Rough Cut crew, BJ Ensweiler, my co-chair, and Diana Laufenberg for everything that they do. And finally, a special thank you for the immense work, really all year round, that goes into hosting EduCon, to Chris Lehman, our fearless leader. We are always so honored and humbled that you come here every year and engage in the learning alongside us. Some of you have been here since the first EduCon and perhaps are just as surprised as we are that this has continued. Talk about sustainability. Whether you're an Edu veteran or an Edu newbie, we hope you'll be back and help us spread the word among your colleagues to continue the learning in 2018s. And I'd like to tell you the dates for next year, so get out your phones and robots to mark down the dates for the next EduCon. EduCon 2018 will be January 26th, 27th, and 28th. Yay, thank you. Just a couple of housekeeping announcements. Check your programs to learn more about SLA's Summer Institute, where teachers of all backgrounds are invited to come continue the learning with us and immerse yourselves in SLA's style of teaching and learning. It is run by SLA teachers with SLA students. It's a pretty fantastic experience for a week in the summer from July 17th through 21st. And presenters, if you have led a session so far or if you're doing so today, keep an eye out for your gift bags, which our students are dropping off in your rooms. This is the first year that your gift is made in-house by our engineering department, and that's pretty cool, and it's awesome. And so please keep an eye out for that. Shout out to John Camel for making that happen. And now, to moderate this morning's fantastic panel, I am so happy to introduce former SLA teacher, EduCon co-founder, writer of the National Education Technology Plan, and all-around nice guy, Zach Chase.
Good morning, everybody. I'm going to ask our panel to sit in regular chairs, and if you want to come on, just welcome our panel to the stage, and I'll do the bios then, because right now they're sitting on tables, and that seems not all right. So welcome our panel to the stage. And as they're doing that, don't watch them, watch me. So in the really nice black jacket, Sam Abrams is the director of the National Center for the Study of Privatization in Education at Teachers College, Columbia University. Abrams studies school curricula, finance, and administration. He teaches a course on educational privatization and school choice as a member of the faculty of the Department of Education Policy and Social Analysis at Teachers College, and is the author of Education and the Commercial Mindset from Harvard University Press. He was previously a high school teacher of economics and history for 18 years. And the book, which you are going to want as you listen to him speak, is available upstairs in our bookstore for a reduction of 40% off. So somebody go get my copies before these people do. Also, I'm going out of order here, Renee Moore teaches English at Mississippi Delta Community College. She taught English and journalism at East Side High School in Cleveland, Mississippi from 1990 to 1998, where she was a district teacher of the year. Then from 98 to 2005, she served as lead teacher at Broad Street High School in Shelby, Mississippi. In 2001, she was named Mississippi Teacher of the Year, as well as a recipient of the National Milken Educator Award. While raising 11 children, she returned to college to obtain her teaching credentials at Delta State University and earned a Master of Arts in Literature from the prestigious Breadloaf School of English at Middlebury College in Vermont. Yeah, right? Ms. Moore is a National Board Certified Teacher in Adolescent English Language Arts. Yeah? We're a rowdy crowd. If you're just starting on the coffee, we'll be happy for you to join us in about 20 minutes or so. And former member of the Board of Directors at the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards. She served on the Board of Trustees for the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching. In 2013, Moore received the Ovid Vickers Award for Excellence in Teaching of English from her colleagues at the two-year College Education English Association of Mississippi. She has also been named William Winters Scholar in the Humanities in Mississippi. Moore works with the Center for Teacher Quality based in North Carolina and has co-authored several of its teacher solutions publications, including Performance Pay for Teachers and Teaching 2030. She was featured in the recent CTQ book, Teacherpreneurs, Innovative Teachers Who Lead But Don't Leave. The author of many professional articles and published book chapters, Moore also maintains a popular education blog, Teach More, and is a member of #Educolor. I thought they may be in the house today. Yeah. Derek McCoy is currently the principal of West Rowan Middle School and Rowan Salisbury Schools. He brings a wide range of experiences as a secondary school administrator, instructional coach, and director of curriculum and innovation. Derek was named as a 2014 Digital Principal of the Year by NASSP and has received recognitions from other groups for his efforts to use social media and technology to help connect learners with best practices and experts, create impactful collaboration networks, and ultimately help grow all schools. Woo! That was good whistling. Chris Double Dog dared me on this last one to just say, and she's Deborah Meier. I think that counts.
That wasn't the dare.
There was an expletive there. My mom might be watching. Deborah and I were talking a little bit upstairs, and this has been my litmus test for coming here. I said to people, I get to moderate a panel. Who's on it? And I list people, and I say, and Deborah Meier. And the people I knew I wanted to stay friends with knew who Deb Meier was. She spent over 50 years in the service of students and teachers in public education and has opened some of the most, that's right there. Opened some of the most remarkable schools we can imagine, and is one of the co-founders of the Coalition of Essential Schools. She has 3 grandchildren and 4 great-grandchildren, one of whom is a high school teacher. And 2 of the grandchildren, our children were teachers as well. And more importantly, the space that you're sitting in right now sits on her shoulders. The ideas that she has put forward and helped to put into practice, it's heavy some days too. Over those 50 years, hopefully we are working to make better and better realize every day here at SLA and in all of our campuses. So please give it up again for our distinguished panel. I gave a brief overview of some of the questions and topics we'd be discussing to these 4 earlier, and they said, just the easy ones. So I'm going to open up the panel with a question for all 4 of you, and you will decide who gets to go first. As an English teacher, I want to start with a quotation. A famous female Jewish poet from New York once wrote, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. What is education's role in sustaining these ideas?" No softballs here.
Getting rid of the current president.
after that,
I would suggest perhaps a power vacuum.
No, I used to say that it's nice to be old because you've seen everything before, and that it's unfortunate to be old because you've seen everything before. But this is something I've never seen before. So, I guess I was at a workshop yesterday whose title was, something about regard. Someone remind me. Having a regard for every child.
Unconditional positive
Unconditional
regard.
And I thought that's maybe the answer, is we have to design schools that give unconditional regard to our colleagues and to our students. Because that's what the assumption behind that message is, that we are here as a country to give each other equal regard. Now, we have never done that, but sometimes it feels more like we're moving in that direction. And so the scary part right now is that quote. Does that quote sound sensible? Does it mean anything to the students we teach, given the world they're living in right now?
Hey, why don't I think when you think of all the professions that touch the lives of people, nothing breeds more opportunities for enlightenment, opportunities for service, opportunities for collaboration and compassion than what can happen in the school building. So teachers are the fundamental. Teachers are the fundamental. Education plays a vital role in providing a voice, a platform, a creative medium for the unheard and the marginalized, if that is a purpose. Sometimes schools lose purpose in saying, oh, everybody has to read, so everybody reads from this primer, or everybody has to add, so everybody uses this worksheet. School's function is so much bigger. It can be, and it needs to be so much bigger than that. I talk at a lot of tech conferences, but integrating technology is crucial to what we have to do, but it's not about technology. It's not about this book or that resource. It has to be about what kind of citizens, what kind of people do we want to produce? I want my school to be a place where every child, and I'm in a rural school. We have some kids who come to school with some concerns. But I want every child to be able to come to school and know that it's a sanctuary, to know that, hey, this is going on in my community, or I see this happening to somebody. I want to do something about it. And then I want to empower that child. Like, hey, do it, kick it. But in order for that to happen, we have to untrain ourselves, teachers, because when we come out of college, we think the best way to lead a class is everybody be quiet and everybody do this and do it like. So we got to unlearn, then relearn, and then inspire, motivate, and then start back over. And then when we get comfortable, start back over.
Renee, I'm going to toss it to you. In your work with the Center for Teacher Quality,
I do.
how are we doing that? How are we doing at setting that mindset in our teachers and helping to think about what is the purpose of what we're doing? And are we coming up with a good answer to that?
Before I answer that, let me put some people's mind at ease. He said I raised 11 children. He didn't say I had 11 children. I know some of y'all look worried back there. I'm okay. You're the last, see?
Last
It's
12.
My mom raised 12.
which
All right.
says. But we're not doing as well, clearly, as we should be doing. Although I see hopeful signs in terms of teacher preparation, more hopeful signs than what I've seen in a long time towards that. But it's by no means done. And my bigger concern is the teachers who are already in the field, Because I actually have more hope for the teachers who are coming than I do for the ones who are already out, because the ones who are already out have already been through that training or lack thereof and need to be retrained, have to change their paradigm, and that is a harder job than preparing the ones who are coming. For those who are already in the field, getting them to shift their thinking and their paradigms and their way of looking at students is a much harder job. I co-wrote a curriculum for a social justice curriculum for teachers going through a leadership program, nationwide leadership program. And while it was very rewarding work, it was interesting work, it was, to me, just fascinating how many of these teachers, many of whom considered themselves to be progressive teachers, had such backward thinking and such difficult time making shifts, and particularly in how they thought about children of color and how they would work with children of color. So much paternalism, so much misguided thinking about what is best for other people's children, as Lisa Delpy would say. So there's a lot of work to be done, and a lot of it is in the present tense, more so than the future tense. I tend to be more hopeful about the future tense, partly because of my background with National Board, as well as my work with CTQ, because a lot of the principles of, a lot of the National Board standards are now becoming embedded into our teacher preparation and into our teacher systems and training, so that more of that is becoming expected. And being a National Board teacher, one of the standards of National Board is that you be culturally competent and that you demonstrate that cultural competence, that you be more concerned about and know your students, know your subject area, know how to teach this subject to these students. So that tends to make me more hopeful. But for those of us that are out here in the field, we've got some work to do.
Yes. I want to talk a little bit about the work around privatization. A lot of the conversations that I get to have as a public school teacher and somebody who works in public education is saying, oh, well, public education is a public good, which is a term that a lot of people who haven't had that conversation before don't know what it means. So what are we seeing around privatization, and how do we best fight to maintain that public good? And I use fight because today I'm feeling fighty.
Well, Zach, that's an excellent way of putting it. When we talk about a public good, we're really talking about something that can't benefit anyone without benefiting everyone, like clean air, clean water. Good public education benefits everybody. There are, as economists put it, positive externalities, positive rub-off effects for everybody with good public education. I don't think I'm Mike. Nope.
Now, we're on it.
We need a mic.
We're on it. Okay.
Right. Now I'm mic'd? Okay. I'm still not mic'd.
There you go.
Now I'm mic'd, okay. So that is something we have to keep very much at the forefront of our minds, especially because, apropos Deborah Meier's words, it's unlikely we're going to get rid of President Trump in the near future. And I was talking with Chris Lehman last night about the probability of Betsy DeVos's appointment. I think she's going to get every Republican vote. Chris disagreed, but I think she will regardless. She's going to be our Secretary of Education, I believe. And in that regard, to sustain public education, I think we have to be mindful of the words of someone very different from Emma Lazarus, and that's George Kennan, when he said in response to the expansion of the Soviet Union, contain, contain, contain. Much as the ACLU lawyers are now at airports combating this absurd executive order, we have to contain, contain, contain Betsy DeVos at every turn, because she will ruin public education, and it will no longer serve that public function that it long has.
But besides which, it seems to me, if by any chance she was not elected, I don't know for sure that the next person that's nominated would be, I mean, so I think it's the fight against some of these candidates is worth doing, but what we're facing is, the victory of a very bad set of people and ideas.
Right. It doesn't have to be Betsy DeVos. It could be a replacement. She's a vehicle for Donald Trump's ideas, and it's Donald Trump's administration, when it comes to education and everything else, that does have to be contained, 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 in the words of George Kennan. on every front.
Let me raise another, because we skipped over one issue, and that is, I think it's remarkable that we expect, in terms of the common good, that spending 12 years or more in one of the most authoritarian institutions we've ever created, schools, will lead people to be good citizens of a democracy. Now, I really mean that. I think if you look at what the experience is, it's sharpest and toughest for low-income and black kids and Hispanic kids. That school looks more like prison for them than the many others. But even in nice suburban, semi-progressive schools, the principal worries about everybody worries about the layer above them, and the only power people have is on people below them, if you know. And I remember my mother saying to me, you have a right to yell at people who are more powerful, but don't yell at people who are less powerful. And schools, it seems to me, have been organized on the exact opposite principle. It's okay to yell at people who you have power over. And so I think it even makes us teachers bad examples. Even good teachers, I think, tend to forget that they should yell at the principal rather than the kids.
That was,
Bounce off of both of those.
please do.
Start with Debbie's point. You're right, schools are not neutral spaces, and everything about education in these United States is political. So schools the current school systems we have are designed to make both students and teachers submissive and compliant. That's what they're designed to do. And to undo that is going to take tremendous moral and collaborative effort on our part, which brings me back to your point. I think we can do more than contain. We should, but I think we can do more than contain. And as a classroom teacher, who's and still a classroom teacher, sometimes we have to be subversive, and we literally have to undermine what's being done. That's right. Sometimes, oftentimes, what's being done. I'm thinking of a particular example. When I taught at Broad Street High School in Shelby, Mississippi, a tiny town, one of these so-called, well, let me put it this way. We were labeled as a failing school because we was designed to fail, if you get my drift there. So our reading scores were too low. So somebody decided that we needed all this help. So rather than let the teachers do what we had been trying to do and help the students, our overzealous superintendent went after and got 5 different grants, reading grants, from 5 different organizations, all aimed at our 7th and 8th graders. Now, you're only talking about 100, 150 kids max. 5 different reading programs for the same school year. 5 sets of curriculum, 5 pacing guides, 5 sets of data keeping, 5 sets of assessments, 5 different professional development programs, all running at the same time for the same kids. We had one teacher who had a stroke. We had another teacher who had a complete nervous breakdown. We had several students who were the students were just decimated by this. And finally, the only way we could bring a stop to that madness was the teachers, we just refused. We just would not do it anymore. Now in Mississippi, that's a big deal. I don't know about up here, but I served on the licensure commission for 10 years, and I can count on no hands the number of teachers who got their licenses removed for incompetence as teachers, even though that's an offense under the statute, the licensure statute, and is easily done, by the way. I can count too many teachers who had their licenses removed for abusing students in other ways. But no teachers, most of the teachers who got their licenses removed, it was for insubordination. That's what will cost you your license, is insubordination against the system, not because I didn't educate children properly, not because I refused to implement these 5 reading programs on these same 100 kids over a school period. So that kind of resistance on the part of teachers, going back to your first question, is how we make schools more democratic. The teachers themselves have to stand up for democracy, and the first place we stand up for it is in our professional role as teachers. Now, take that with a grain of salt. There are some teachers, quite frankly, who aren't going to stand up for students. we'll have that discussion later. But those who will,
Panel
and
part
not everyone can. I mean, to stand up for children in a lot of cases, it will cost you your job. I know people who've been fired. I've been invited out of school districts for standing up for students. That's not a decision you can make easily. Not everyone's in a position to do that. But if we don't set some kind of an example and draw a line somewhere, millions of children are suffering. Schools have become places that criminalize children of color, that silence teachers and parents of color. We can't, and to just tolerate that, to an unjust, unequal educational system is unsustainable. It cannot be sustained. It will implode morally on itself. But we can't just stand back and wait for that to happen. Just because they're unethical, just because they're inherently unstable, doesn't mean that they'll dissolve on their own. They have to be pushed. They have to be driven out and changed from within. So I guess I said all of that to say, you know, we have to be more proactive in our resistance and in our defense of children.
Derek?
If I could, I was about to imitate you, Renee, and say if I could piggyback on Deb, then Sam, then well, I'm just gonna hit on
Piggyback on everyone.
everybody. And I'll invite the audience. Please share your thoughts on this piece. When we talked about, Renee, you mentioned how some of our more experienced teachers have the more difficult time unlearning some things than our newer teachers. I think a fundamental piece, and this goes back to a point that you just made, a fundamental piece that everybody has to unlearn, that we have to deprogram everybody on, is not so much their college experience, but their own K-12 experience.
Say that.
That's the piece
Say
that we
that.
have to deprogram teachers on. In my school building, some of the people who have made the most fantastic shifts in their change to create student-centered classrooms, who bought into our new core values about empowering students, empowering student-centered learning, they are our experienced teachers who get it. They wake up and say, yeah, you know what, it is about them. Some of our lesser experienced teachers, you know, they've more recent training in that sage on the stage and that control piece where their own K-12 experience is more relevant and they can put their hands on it. It just goes across. I think rethinking, in order for us to see the innovative thought and forward progression that we want and need to have in education, the student-centered planning and really shift focuses away from just high accountability and this, that, and the other. We're going to have just a cultural renorming of what education is. I mean, you know, when you ask these people walking on the street right now what their impression of a classroom is, they're going to tell you rows and, you know, this and that stuff. We have to renorm what education is, and we have to share that. It's not this. It can be that. It needs to be that. If we want to create a room full of, if we want our classroom to be a room full of activists like this, you know, that's not going to start with legislation. That's going to start with some fundamental belief shifts on every level, in every room, in every building.
So go ahead.
Yeah, but one of the points that you made that I think is important is that if your job is the only way your children are going to get a meal the next day, you have less. So maybe there does need to be some legislative, and you know, because I always felt, you know, it's a luxury sometimes to be able to be a teacher who protests. But when I started teaching in Chicago, I was amazed at how humiliating the setting was for teachers in schools, and even the process of becoming a teacher, and that we were treated like children, except we shouldn't treat children that way. And it's not a surprise then, right, that if you're treated like children who shouldn't be treated that way, that we treat the children in front of us that way. Yep. I taught Head Start here in Philadelphia, and in the first year it was in existence, and 4 days we ran our programs, And the fifth day we came for professional development to some auditorium in this grand city. And there all these grown-up teachers sat learning children's songs and little, I don't know, up the spider, someone remembers.
Oh, yeah.
All these little things, and I thought, this is an auditorium filled with teachers, and the person in charge of this program apparently thinks we're 5-year-olds, 4-year-olds. And I was furious at the fact that we don't do anything about this. Nobody in this teaching group came dutifully every Friday to spend a day away from the kids that they were there to teach or to work with, getting a bad model of what it was they were supposed to do. And we hadn't given an IQ test at the beginning of the year, and we were told, don't worry about the scores there, because the whole point is that when you're going to take this test again in the spring, it'll be the exact same test, and the scores will go up, of course, because if you give the same test twice and you, the teacher, know what they are, you're going to teach to that. And it just, the level of insanity that I found in schools, and the fact that, what you were saying, the teachers come there straight out of, unfortunately, fairly authoritarian teacher education programs.
100%.
And they act like children. I was fairly old. I was in my 30s before I started teaching. And I was struck by how young teachers would gather in the morning to talk about what mood the principal was in. And it reminded me of, children worrying about, is mother in a bad mood today? And they started coming to me to bring up things at staff meetings. Would you raise this question at a staff meeting? And I'd say, why don't you raise it? Well, you seem to be able to get away with it. And the idea that such a setting, that children keeping company with a bunch of scared, fearful adults could be good for our society.
So we're getting close to running the risk of what Kristen Hokanson would describe as admiring the problem.
Okay.
So how do we create and sustain conversations, right? Because yelling up gets people's attention. And I worry that we become so fascinated with how do I get the attention of the power structure that I'm trying to break apart and disrupt. And wow, I've got your attention. And I worry that we're not thinking about what step 2 might be. And how do we sustain that conversation once the attention has been gotten? And how do we start having that dialogue that puts these ideas into the water and then goes to the teachers who are, as Renee is pointing out, kind of the resistant ones who aren't going to stand up. And how do we invite everybody into that conversation to make sure that it works, that isn't authoritarian, right? Because then we run the risk of, well, you should all be really progressive. We're going to make you progressive. So how do we do that? How do we invite folks in the same way that we kind of wish they were inviting kids in?
We do have one institution which we don't take proper advantage of because we treat it the same way we treat schools, is our unions. I mean, people grumble about the union, my colleagues. And here we do have in Philadelphia and most places in the country, not all, unions which we could transform to be the instruments of the kind of change we want. And yet we tend to treat the union the same way we treat the principal or the bureaucracy. We don't want to make trouble. And we have to begin to enjoy making trouble. Wherever we are, that's the place to start, is to be a troublemaker. And help each other be troublemakers. And that's where I see the union's role, is to bring teachers together to discuss how we can sustain each other in a setting in which we're going to cause trouble.
Other folks?
So you're envisioning unions as networks, really, which is where my mind went when you asked that question about how we sustain it. I was thinking in terms of teacher networks. And of course, I work in an open shop state. So we don't have collective bargaining, we have no bargaining power. The unions have affiliates there, but they have no say-so in our contracts or under state law. They have actually no presence, but they are great networks. They are mobilizers of teachers and of parents. And so a lot of the issues around education, people actually look to the teacher union affiliates for leadership on those issues. And they serve as networks that bring teachers together across the state to work on those issues. And I think networking is probably more of a more powerful tool at this point, both for changing education and for changing teachers than anything else. And there are all types of networks. That takes many different forms.
Yes.
We've got social networks, we've got other kinds of political, semi-political networks. There are all kinds of associations of teachers and ways that teachers can work networks, both for educational purposes, our own education, I'm talking about our own learning, and for policy purposes. We're seeing a lot of indications of teachers using networks to affect policy. I'm thinking a few years back of the, help me out, Save Our Schools March.
Yes.
Okay. That was organized, that was a network organized event. I'm thinking of things like the Global Education Conference, teachers all over the world connecting with each other. And some of those things directly affect policy. I'm thinking, of course, of EduColor and other networks of teachers where we're able to do things both within our classrooms and outside of our classrooms to influence both policy and pedagogy. And I think that's the most promising place for those changes to take place and for those things, because we have to reimagine things. We have to see them differently.
I'm like you, Renee. I'm from North Carolina. I'm currently in North Carolina. Been there for 11 years, but I started my first 10 years in Georgia. So no unions there. No unions there. No collective bargaining, none of that. But here's what I'll say though, and I love how you hit that network piece. The thing that has made the most difference for me in terms of my challenging, just my being able to challenge and raise different points and to find like-minded people is my professional learning network on social media. So Twitter has made, I wouldn't be the educator I am today without being able to connect with other people,
I agree.
exchange ideas, and move points that way. In the absence of, the unions make a huge difference up here, or can make a huge difference up here, but in the absence of one, that network has meant more to me than anything. That's where I first started Jose in his blog. I know a lot about Jose and only met him today, and had like exchanged 3 or 4 sentences. But he fires me up. I share his blog out. Lots of blogs, lots of contributions from people in this room. The network is where it is. We have to continuously work at mobilizing people, at sharing the good and the next and what needs to happen, and keep the conversation going. Keep the conversation going. The unions is a great way to happen, a great way for that to happen. In the absence of one, though, create one and commit to it, and commit to it. Commit to joining a group that is going to challenge and it's going to challenge your viewpoints where you are. That's the biggest piece for me right now and my teachers, is because, again, deprogramming K-12 experiences for my teachers, I don't want to say my teachers, I have great teachers, don't get me wrong.
They're watching this right now.
They're watching this right. You guys are awesome. Truly. I work with some great teachers. But when you're fixed here, it takes some work to unfix, to unglue.
So I
just want to interrupt.
I'm gonna say no.
I'm going to be. I think I catch myself occasionally saying my teachers. I think you and I, as others principals, should find another term.
I agree.
It's okay to say my children, but I think and even with teachers in a classroom, I think there's a whole set of language and assumptions that have been so part of the system. You know, when I started teaching, you couldn't be a married woman and teach in St. Louis. I mean, if you think about the history, particularly of elementary education, we've come in some ways a long way, because we have never been seen as really professionals, or just plain human beings who have rights. I shouldn't even forget about professionals, even if we weren't professionals. And I just,
I agree.
I think there's this tradition that we sometimes unwittingly, in our own language, and so, you know, my teachers used to sit when I talk, and if I said my teachers, someone would yell out, who? Because there's a whole set of assumptions that I think are very hard to undo.
Well, if I can chime in about this issue of professionalism.
We're working on
Who
it.
is that?
Okay.
School District Philadelphia and our audio systems.
This is what learning sounds like.
This is the modern, this is the new world.
I mean, the issue of professionalism is fundamental to a solid school. You see it here at SLA in particular. I'm thinking about the way the faculty are treated, and the faculty lounge, which I always consider a fractal, you know, some kind of microcosmic representation of how teachers are treated and regarded. Here, teachers are regarded and treated very well. They want to stay here, and that radiates in the classroom. It reaches the students. This is true at all good schools. Obviously, professionalism has to be achieved on many fronts. Teachers are not paid what they ought to be paid in the United States. In this regard, I've done a lot of international comparative analysis. Teachers in the United States, for example, make 68% of what their college classmates make. So if you went to Penn State, and your classmate went into accounting, and she's making $50,000 a year, you're making $34,000 a year. You're priced out. And in other countries, that's not the case. And I'll talk about this regarding my book later on today, but I've done a lot of regression analysis in this regard, and you can see, for example, that in Finland, teachers are paid at the upper secondary level, the high school level, 110% of what their college classmates make. So if your college roommate at the University of Helsinki makes 50,000 euros as an accountant, you're making 55,000 euros. Now, this is obviously a battle that's very hard to win. This is a huge battle, but we need to keep it in mind to understand what's going on in the United States. As Zach noted at the outset, I was a teacher for 18 years. I always had a second job, and we're priced out, okay? But what I can say, in terms of what we can do at the micro level, is what Chris Lehman has achieved here, where you have a beautiful teacher's lounge where people can congregate. It says a lot about who they are, and that's something that has to be achieved at schools everywhere. Principals need to concede that, and teachers need to fight for it. Principals have to be on the same page. Regarding Finland, actually principals and teachers belong to the same union, so they're on the same page. And something I note in my book is that I had read a long time ago in a magazine, it was a French magazine, called The New Observer, Le Nouvel Obs, back in 2005. This journalist named Caroline Brizard went up to Finland to find out what was so great about the school system. And what she focused on was the teacher's lounge. And she said, gosh, in France we don't have that. And that's true. I've spent time doing research in France, and they don't treat their teachers in the same way. It's all top down. And in Finland, the principals and the teachers decide on the curricula. They hire whom they want to hire. And they have, as Caroline Brizard observed, and I saw in 16 different schools that I visited across the country, beautiful teacher lounges. So that's one place where we can start. We're not going to be able to get teacher salaries up, unfortunately, to 110% of what other college graduates make. That should be our goal. In terms of sustainability, that's the only way we really can keep people in the profession for the long term. There are other ways we can do it too, which we can discuss. But we can do what Chris and his colleagues have accomplished here by making teachers feel very valued.
I'm going to do I'm going to do a teacher ninja move here first, so listen to what's going on question-wise. Sam, I'm going to ask, we talked a little bit about networks and finding your network and using that as a positive force for change and thinking about that conversation. So the question to you is going to be, is that working? How do networks influence policy? How do networks kind of make some of those systemic changes that we're talking about? But while he's thinking about that, I'd like to think a little bit about, Derek, a piece that you brought up. This is where I found other like-minded people, and I worry that we are trying to find way too many like-minded people and ignoring the important conversation with unlike-minded people. And where are we creating the space for that? So Sam's going to answer.
Okay.
And then I'd like to have that kind of conversation about what about the people who think different than us?
Yeah, I agree.
And that's everybody. The us is whatever you think. It's not an assumption that we all think the same thing in this room.
Okay, well, I'll try my best to address that question. Actually, it concerns something that Derek and I were just discussing before we got up here.
You're okay.
In terms of networks, something that can be accomplished, and it has been accomplished here in the United States, in Derek's state of North Carolina. And we have to push for this at the state level. Education is pretty much a state issue across this country. And that is programs like the North Carolina Teaching Fellows Program, which unfortunately just got killed by a parsimonious, foolish, myopic Republican legislature.
So you're on the fence?
I'm not on the fence. Okay. This could not have been dumber. And this was started back in 1981. And students from high school promised to teach in the state of North Carolina for 5 years.
That's right.
Were given a full ride at any of the UNC campuses. They were taking in 500 students a year by the time this finished, 25 years after its inception. And students who were accepted scored a standard deviation higher on the SAT than all other students in the UNC system. So that's a 1,200 in the SAT rather than 1,000. Okay, if we're going to consider the SAT as some measure of something. It's some measure of something, okay? I can see Debbie shaking her head.
We're about to find out what happens when we disagree.
Okay. However, Debbie's not going to disagree with this, okay? Michael Weinrib had a great piece in the New York Times back in 2011 upon the 20th anniversary of the Teaching Fellows Program, and he noted that for year 6, 73% of North Carolina Teaching Fellow alumni were still teaching.
Yes.
After 20 years, 60% were still in the classroom.
Yes.
In year 6, for Teach for America, 7%. So 7% versus... Talk 7% versus 73%, 60% after 20 years. Okay, this only cost North Carolina $13 million a year, but this Republican legislature killed it because it was too expensive. So in terms of networking, that worked in North Carolina. That's the thing, very practical thing that we should be fighting for across the country at each state.
So, I feel like you just gave us an example of something failing, though.
Well, but it could, no, it worked for 25 years.
Right.
Okay, and it's something that needs to be replicated. They've tried to replicate it. We've met so much resistance. This is not the kind of resistance we should brook.
Can I just ask Sam, in your work looking internationally, I think the other big piece for collegial professional lives is the time that teachers have to be together in their school. And I think the American education system is at the bottom when it comes to providing a sufficient paid time to be professionals. You know, doctors assume that they spend at least 20 minutes for every patient they see without the patient there. In other words, that we need time for not only preparation of our individual work, but our collective work.
Right.
And one of the things we did in the schools that I've been involved in is figure out ways in which we can meet collectively.
Yes.
And without, you know, without being super dedicated, we do, you know, be nice to go home and see your own children. So I think that's very fundamental in schools. I think teachers wouldn't be as stupid as they often are if they could hear each other even. and talk among themselves. They spend their time, you know, a teacher of 5-year-olds spends most of her day with 5-year-olds.
Right.
It would be nice to spend part of that day with other adults. So you know, this question of how long people stay in the field and is called burnout.
Right.
The only thing that burns out are appliances. Just want to remind you, people don't burn out unless they're treated like appliances.
Right.
And it's okay to get tired,
Right.
but you should not allow yourself to be treated in that way. You just shouldn't allow yourself. And you need colleagues, and that's in some ways why Twitter is not enough. You need colleagues around you who are going to stand up with you when you make a...
There's a reason, though, why our school systems are designed to discourage and even to fight against that type of collaboration and time and innovation. The system is actually designed to squelch that. Everything about how it's built is built for, you know, this. We're very much into the factory model, and, you know, doing things on a certain times, at certain ways, working side by side but not together, you know, kind of situation. I'm saying that as a former factory worker from Detroit. You know, the factory model, that's what I see in school. It is it, and the value that we place, the value that we place on collaboration and on our teachers says something about the design of this system. Teacher salaries are indicative of how little value we really place on teaching and education in this country. I've been a public school teacher for almost 30 years now, 28, 29 years. I'm arguably one of the most decorated public school teachers in my state, and I have yet to make $50,000 a year, and probably won't before I retire.
Yet to make what?
$50,000 a year. That's like a dream figure. So, you know, what does that say to the people, to the young people that I work with and, you know, who aspire? And amazingly, I have many of my former students are now in education, including some of my own children. But they're clearly not doing it because they saw mama make a lot of money, you know. So, but that says something about what we value, because where our treasure is, that's where our heart is, right? So if we really thought it was important, we would put money with it. But I'm bouncing back to your other question for us. Good ninja move there, by the way.
Thank you.
I want to hear more about what people think about the concept of teacher-powered schools. Everybody familiar with what I'm talking about? Schools actually run by teachers, or schools that are run democratically, let me put it that way, run by parents, run by the students, run by teachers, as opposed to, and whether that's a model that we think is sustainable and doable in different places. Now, I know it looks different in different places. I used to get caught up in this whole, you know, debate over charters, because I really didn't know what that was, because in my little corner of the world there were no charter schools, so I had no firsthand knowledge of what that is. But I understand that in different parts of the country there are different configurations of schools and schooling, and of course that's not a new idea. That goes back to Coalition of Essential Schools and a lot of movements that came before us. But I'm curious with that model, you know, where teachers are actually empowered, because a lot of people think teachers have power in schools. Teachers have no power in schools. We don't get to run things in schools. We don't get to make decisions in schools. You know, those things are done to us and for us. But what does it look like when the teachers are empowered, and when they do have the, and when the principals and administrators and teachers are working in a very different kind of paradigm? What does that look like? This is my first time at SLA. How does that look like for y'all? And is that a model that will take us to where we need to be?
You know, there's a short movie about Mission Hill School, which just is a picture of a democratic school.
It is.
A school in Boston.
It's a good
and
example.
it's a really, what the film also shows teachers arguing and discussing among themselves. And note every decision in that school involves teachers making decisions.
Is that the one, the year at Mission Hill?
Yeah. But it also involves parents in a different way. And you know, I think that one reason teachers are afraid of parents is that they themselves are powerless and parents feel powerless. So these two powerless groups, instead of getting together, are often fighting each other. And that's another, Chicago, Karen Lewis in Chicago, who was the head of the Chicago Teachers Union, she managed to get parents behind them. And so when they went on strike, the parents were out there with them. And I think that's another dilemma we face as teachers is the time to build an alliance with parents. And it's connected to what you were discussing about design, because the place that parents are most paralyzed is in schools with poor children and children of color, whose teaching force is largely white. I mean, they're just piles upon piles of things we have to push aside and fight against. And while we can't do them all at one time, we have to see the connections between those fights, so that we can mobilize better if we're connected to families, communities, and our colleagues. And so we need the time also to build those ties with families.
The film that Deb is mentioning is called A Year at Mission Hill, and it's available in 10 parts on YouTube. Maybe you wanted to watch it with your faculty. I don't know, just an idea. So if we could get back to that question of how do we have conversations, how do we get out of an echo chamber? How do we not just surround ourselves with people who agree with us? How do we do that?
So I think a lot of this comes from, the issue of the echo chamber is a problem and systematic. It's propagated by the system. It's propagated by the system. We, in our schools, or in whatever meetings we'll gravitate to people who talk like us or think like us, and not really. It takes conscious effort to bring along people who don't think like us, but that's good conscious effort, and that's good work, and that's great work. We set aside money at our school to send teachers to conferences to get inspired to do some different things and to see some different stuff. We set aside, we make specific plans that we need to see this shift happen, so we need to attach this person to a mentor or a thought partner and make these things happen. I think my friend Joe Mize and I have a saying that principal school is broken, because we talk, you become a principal your first year, it's crazy because you're learning everything, and it's a comedy. You're in charge of all these lives, and you're determining trajectory, and you took a business class in school and whatever, who teaches you how to be creative? You learn, when you get in that school, that's really your on-the-job training to think creatively and think laterally and approach problems differently. So how do we shift people's mindsets? That's significant. That is, if I'm a traditionalist, that is significant. How do I bring you along? That should have been some great talk that I had before I got. It should have been some great PD, but now I got to figure it out on the spot. So I could talk about me and my experiences have been about like Chris Lehman. Like Chris and I met on Twitter years ago, but we've only met last year. And this experience, my being here, is the result of us networking and then finally coming together. So that bridge and that relationship, bringing people along that way, us constantly talking about the power of building networks, building those relationships. Here's what you're doing, but we can do better. Here are some resources on how to do better.
So building a network, though, building a network that is empty of thought, right, is a danger that we run. Like, oh, we are connected to all these people.
I agree.
What are we doing?
I agree.
So what?
Let me push back on that.
Yeah.
Bringing along thing, though, because if all you're trying to do is bring other people along to the way you think, then you're still going to probably end up with an echo chamber kind of effect, because only the people who want to be brought along are going to even have anything to do with you. Yeah, with the echo you like. There you go. On an individual level, I made a conscious decision to expand my Twitter feed deliberately, very intentionally, to include people who have very different points of view than I do about education and how we should do it, and to deliberately engage with them in a respectful way about that difference of ideas. That's how I was.
Twitter chats, on Twitter chats?
Not just Twitter chats, but my own personal Twitter feed. I deliberately add people to my feed who I know have very different points of view than I do, and I deliberately engage with them about those different points of view. That's how I came to see some things that I had not seen before and to understand some things. But it has to be intentional, though. It's not just, you know, it can't just be an argument back and forth.
100%, I agree. I think, and I think that's the, when we're talking about 2017, all right, and the limited time educators have in the school building, it is significant to create time for teachers to get together and plan. So, you know, we set aside an extra day for our teachers to have a planning period throughout the week. That takes away from, we had to give some stuff up for that to happen. We juggle some stuff around to get creative, to give teachers some more time, like a half day to do some planning. That's money, that's significant. It needs to happen, no regret, but it needs to happen. But all these things come at a cost, a good cost, because kids win in the end, and that's what we want to happen. But in 2017, we have to think at networking, think of resourcing differently, or whatnot, and social media plays a part in that. Social media plays a part in that. We have to teach that. That's an ongoing conversation, and that starts conversations. It's not the end of it. It's not the end, but it starts. It progresses to ed camps. It progresses to other informal or formal meets or whatnot. That's one way. That's one way of how we can shift people's mindsets.
You know, if we all agree, we wouldn't need democracy, right? Democracy is only important because we don't all agree, which means we have to learn how to disagree. And schools are not set up for helping us learn how to disagree.
I agree with that.
And
that was totally unintentional.
And certainly they're certainly true in the classroom too. Do we honor children who have the wrong ideas, so to speak? And you know, the kid in my kindergarten class who insisted that a rock was a living thing. And there was two ways I could handle it. I could squelch him because he was just plain wrong, or I could explore what he was thinking. And actually, after a half an hour of us all discussing whether rocks were alive, he had convinced everybody but me that they were. And I went home to call some professor I knew, a scientist, to ask him, how, you know, is there any truth to this kid's argument? He was a 5-year-old. And he said, yes, actually, he's on the cutting edge of modern science. So I think we have to teach it in our classrooms and honor it, and we have to teach it among ourselves. But it goes against the grain. We're not used to thinking of argument as an essential bedrock of democracy.
Exact same for teachers. Exact same for teachers, though. So Lencioni in The Advantage, he talked about a healthy culture can tolerate some argument, some dissension, and bringing it about. So if you got 3 ELA teachers sitting around, and they've come up with a great rotation, some digital rotation, and one teacher is thinking, let's teach this standard through PBLs and blah 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 blah. We haven't deprogrammed K-12 experiences. So majority wins. Majority wins, as opposed to, nah, this other way is the best way to teach this. So we do need to teach our kids that, but are we capable of teaching our kids that?
If we can't do it ourselves.
If we can't do it ourselves.
So I would say that you have some experience in, I'm not going to do the bridging differences pun, but you have tried to kind of learn out loud and disagree out loud in your exchange exchanges with Diane Ravitch. Where did that come from, and what was some learning that you were looking to do in those exchanges?
Well, actually, I started off trying to persuade Diane Ravitch because she and I had been enemies for so many years that I didn't even occur to me. But it is true that it's fun if you enjoy an argument. Now, I come from a family that, you know, my father would have been mad at us if we didn't argue. So I know it comes more easily to me. But it can be fun to engage in argument. It can be learning. You can actually learn something. And sometimes you don't learn it till the argument's over, and then you drive home, you think, actually, he had a point. Because during the argument, the only problem with argument is that you're primarily focused on winning.
Mm-hmm.
But, and learning how to have an argument without focusing on winning is an art, and it's part of building a consensus in a staff. And most of the staffs I've worked with, we don't have strictly majority rule. We have a consensus system. And it means you've got to learn to listen to the other person and figure out where can I find a compromise that I can live with and he can live with.
So I want to talk a little bit of pulling together something that Renee said and a piece of what Derek said. Is a paraphrase that I like is wheresoever your master schedule is, there also is your heart. Because if I see that 30 minutes as a teacher that I have as a planning time as a place where I'm just going to go in and argue, my gut is going to be, I actually have better things to do than argue. So it's, where's the space for that conversation and argument in that day? And looking for that. As kind of, we're going to give you the time to plan, and we're going to give you the time to think about what you think.
We're not going to give you, we're going to, the faculty.
Yeah, that's right. We're going to make
the
time.
most important change would be if we could imagine democratizing the life of adults in schools.
Mm-hmm.
And it just transforms the conversation.
I just got schooled.
We took, I'm thinking of one example in the high school. We actually took over PD session, thank God, one day, and turned it into that type of an exchange among the faculty, because it was something we were really concerned about. It was an issue, it was confronting the students, and the administration had come with their little, package and their paid speaker, and this is what y'all are going to do. And we just took the thing over. We just rejected it and said, no, we're gonna hash this out among ourselves, and we're gonna figure out what to do. And it was a one-time thing, but it was a beautiful experience, and it was exactly what I would like to see more of in schools. It happens spontaneously on that occasion, but I think we could encourage that kind of thing to happen with the right tools. And of course, we had a wonderful administrator who was willing then to step back when he saw where that was going. He stepped back and then became part of that discussion. So it took a willingness on the part of all the parties. But that kind of exchange of ideas with those who are different from you, and I don't want anybody to think that what I said earlier, I'm not disparaging veteran teachers by any means. I am a veteran teacher. And you're right, some of the teachers who catch on fastest and change the best and lead change are teachers who have actually been in the classroom a long time. Sometimes the greatest innovation is to reclaim ideas that have been cast aside and people who've been cast aside for various reasons. Sometimes that is the innovation. But to make that space for those discussions, it'll happen if we can model it and if we can show people that it really has value, that it's not just argument for the sake of argument. And we've done a bad job, and I'm a former journalist, okay? I was a journalist for 12 years before I was a teacher. We've done a very bad job of modeling democracy in front of people and what argument and debate looks like. We've turned it into something very ugly and one-sided, and people yelling at each other across a TV screen or a panel. But if we could model true democratic discussion in our classrooms with our students and with our colleagues and initiate that. Now, you gotta understand where I work. I live in the Mississippi Delta. Okay? My colleagues that I work with every day, we are not like-minded at all. Okay? So for me to have discussions with them about what's best for our students takes a lot of effort on my part and their part. But we do manage to have them, and from time to time. And it's the initiation, it's the fact that not being afraid to initiate those conversations with these people that I know hold different ideas than I do, who think that these kids can't learn that stuff, and that these kids need remediation, and these kids need more grit. And rigor, that's right, rigor grits. And the children, and to have those discussions, and for me to get into a space where I could talk to them took real effort on my part, because I had to begin to, first of all, I had to begin to not see them as evil people. I think that was the starting point. I had to see them not as evil people. They actually do care about their profession, they care about teaching. In their own way, they care about children. They just are saddled, as we all are, with what we've been trained in and what we've been taught and what we've lived through. And so to bring them and me to a place where we could talk to each other, it took, somebody had to make the initiative. Fortunately, there were some people in the other point of view who also were making initiative. And I think among us as human beings, there is in us that we can make that initiative. We can step outside of silos. We can step outside of our upbringing. We can step outside of what's been and step into what could be. That's what makes us human beings, the fact that we can see what could be. We have the capacity to imagine. We have the capacity for faith. If we didn't have the capacity for faith, we would never think anything could ever get better, that anything could ever change, and it can. If it can go from good to bad, it can go from bad to good. We just have to have the desire to push it there.
Amen.
All right, preaching. I'll be quiet.
So here's a part of the DNA of Science Leadership Academy is the ethic of care, as kind of explained through the work of Nell Noddings. I wonder, I mean, we do a decent job of caring for the people with whom we agree. How do we care for the people with whom we disagree? How do we sustain everyone so that we can have thinking about, if you want to go hierarchy of needs, how do we sustain people so that we can then get to the intellectual kind of conversations of what is right and wrong for our kids, for ourselves, for our principals, for our systems? Yeah, the questions got easier.
Yeah, so I can talk about the work that we've done at West Rowan in that sense. So this is my second year there, and towards the end of my first year, we redid our visions, our mission statement towards empowering students for personal academic success. And we developed 5 core values: compassion, collaboration, communication. We want to build world-class communicators. Acting with integrity and acting with purpose. So those five things apply to. We're restaurant bulldogs. Apply to all bulldogs, no matter what your age is. So we rolled that out to the students, to the parents, and of course our teachers help develop that. And then we talk about how we want us to collaborate and act with purpose and integrity in everything with it. In everything we do, we act with intentionality. Along with that, we develop the faculty develop our understandings. So when we have meetings and when we're together, we came up with our understandings, kind of like norms, like a PLC norms, but it's bigger than that. I like to think it's bigger than that. I want it to be in the DNA of how we act and how we treat each other. So some of our understandings are, we have a bias towards yes. Okay, no matter we have a bias towards yes. We're not going to shoot anybody's ideas down just because it's new or whatever. Weigh in, then buy in. If there's a meeting with 30 people in the room, and there's a question on the table, everybody has to weigh in on it. Don't make a perfect decision, but make a good decision. So we put these understandings in place to give us an immediate framework for, hey, we value everybody's contribution. We want everybody to act with intentionality, act with purpose, be compassionate towards everybody in the room, assume the good intention, assume the best intention is one of our understandings. For us, taking those specific deliberate steps was an essential part in renorming everybody's thinking towards treating everybody, towards conversations with everybody, towards planning with everybody. So that now we're 90, 100, whatever, we're through this school year, we're seeing those steps and those conversations just gradually change. So over the next couple of years, we'll see, when we're bringing people aboard, they'll know what culture they're coming into, the culture they're helping us build, and our students are taking ownership of that piece. Our students present differently now. So you have to have that vision, have to paint that picture, the hard work in designing it, and then we have to follow through with it, and that's the piece for us. I've always heard core values before, but it wasn't until this year when we started building core values and students start talking about our core values. You're not acting with compassion. I heard two seventh graders talk about, you're not acting with compassion. You blah blah blah, you blah 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 blah. That blew me away. So it takes those deliberate kind of steps.
Can I bring up a related subject, and that is in the last 20 years, before the current administration, the number of minority black teachers in our teaching force has gone down, not up. And if we try to think of what school is like, whether the school belongs to all of us, it's harder for children to think the school belongs to all of us if the people who own the school, so to speak, are obviously not of us. It doesn't mean that black children can only learn from black teachers, etc. But it means there's something odd about the number of urban schools I go to, in which from the leadership down to where the only people of color in the school is the security guard and the dean of discipline. So I think that's a tough one for us to think about how you, especially if you are white, how to create a school that doesn't just belong to me, but belongs to all of us, and which the children see it, and the parents see it as belonging to all of us. And that's going to get tougher in the next 4 years, not easier. But it's absolutely, I think it's essential for the children to belong to a community in which people like themselves. I used to use this term. My brother and I used to go to Yankee games, and the only difference was my brother thought he could be Joe DiMaggio, whereas I at best thought I could marry him. And because I didn't see myself as a woman on that playing field. And I think a very large number of our kids don't see themselves in the playing field of power in their schools.
Marginalized.
Well, I think what we have to acknowledge here, and this is a very difficult thing to acknowledge, is the big economic picture. A lot of people can't afford to become teachers.
My Lord.
And you can't afford to become teachers with that much more college debt. A lot of people have college debt. If you're African American and you've graduated from college, and you have an opportunity to make a lot more money, and your family needs you to make a lot more money, you can't afford the luxury of becoming a teacher. And African Americans have approximately 7% the assets of white people. And you have to think about that. You have to make that calculation. If you're graduated from college as an African American, can I afford to follow my heart and become a teacher? If I can also work for a consultancy or an insurance company and make a lot more money and help out my family. And I think that cold calculation happens. I know Sharif El-Mekki is very involved in getting more African Americans in the classroom. It's a tough, tough struggle, and I think there is this underlying economic narrative that has to be acknowledged. As far as this other matter of inclusion and getting in the other side, I think things that we can do, because that is a very hard problem to solve, this bigger economic picture. Although it has to be acknowledged because we have to look at this problem with our eyes wide open, is the master schedule you mentioned before, to free up time so teachers have more opportunity for dialogue. With performance-based assessments, you have teachers team assessing. That's very important for getting people from different perspectives to work together. And again, the teacher lounge as a beautiful place. So then you get people from different perspectives with that master schedule that allows time together to confer, disagree, and to come to some consensus. Those are very legitimate practical steps that can be taken by school leaders and can be lobbied for by school teachers.
On the subject of more teachers of color, there is the economic piece, very true, as far as the drawing in, but there's also the historical and systemic reasons for that shrinkage in the first place, and there continues to keep minority teachers out. In the book American Public School Teacher, I talked about what happened after the Brown decision and how black teachers and administrators were systematically pushed out of the public school system over a 10, 20-year period. And a lot of that loss we've never recovered from.
Right.
But then also in the current setting, I'm thinking of my own state, where, for example, the teacher licensure pathways are deliberately designed to keep down the number of minorities who can actually get into the profession. And that was done with intentionality. I was sitting at the table when that happened. The idea that we're going to set the exam cut score, what is it, Praxis, and they have, the company gives you the range and says any teacher who scores between here and here, any candidate who scores between here and here is equally qualified to teach. But it just happens, we know from our pilot data that most of the African American and Hispanic candidates score about here. So we're going to set the cut score here, which ensures that we're still getting teachers of quality, because it's, everybody in the range is quality. But it ensures that we won't get the teachers of color. And that was a very deliberate political decision, because everything in education is political.
Also the closing of schools in a lot of,
That too.
Chicago
Who gets
closed
laid off first?
50 schools that were, and the schools were the schools that had the highest percentage of
Who
black
gets
teachers.
laid off first? Who gets assigned to the remediation programs, and who gets assigned to the gifted program?
So,
All that matters.
and I don't know where to attribute this piece, or who to attribute this piece to, but it's also the language we use, the language that our society uses when we talk about education.
My Lord.
So I'm a career-long middle school teacher. Anybody in middle school?
Come on, middle school.
It starts in the middle. It starts in the middle, by the way. Career-long middle school teacher. And when I tell people that I'm a middle school principal, oh God, I couldn't do that. God bless you. And
Got a lot of God bless you.
That kind of stuff.
Help,
That's a norm. That happens 99 out of 100 times. That's a norm. So when that's what I said. I don't know who to attribute this piece to. When do we start saying, oh, I need to be a teacher, or yes, teacher profession revered. When do we start that? But now we allow so much jokingly condensation.
That's it. That's the word.
Not condensation.
Condescension.
Condescension. Thank you.
Yeah.
Condescension, and we laugh it off. I used to laugh it off till about a year ago, and I was like, "Well, no, that's not cool. That's not. It's not cool."
What kind of condescension are you talking about?
Just about people. When I tell people that I'm a middle school educator, I couldn't work with all those hormones and all this and all that. We're talking about 11, 12, 13-year-olds. That's the piece. We're talking about kids who need guidance. And so I own some of that too. So some of that is on me dispelling or sharing the truth about what really goes on in my school. We have an incredible school building. You need to come see what we do in our school building. If you came to my school, you want to start teaching tomorrow. We don't do enough of that.
When I was taking some courses in Temple when I moved to Philadelphia, because I had to take Pennsylvania history and a few other things. And I was an early childhood teacher, and so the head of the department at Temple somehow or other called me into his office to ask me why he was annoyed. Why are you teaching little children? I see you have a very good educational background. Why do we bother to teach, to graduate women like you if you're going to end up teaching little children?
Wow.
My Lord.
Imagine, this was the head of the education school. And I asked him, well, why did you go into this was elementary ed. Did you go into this field? And he said, well, I couldn't find a better job during the Depression. And so then I went into the Army, and when I came out, anyway, he made clear to me that he felt ashamed of his status, and I should feel ashamed of my status. Early childhood education was babysitting, nanny work. And why would we bother to educate you to do that?
Well,
So that it's like these children, which you mentioned, that just beware. Every time someone says, those children, you got to interrupt that conversation.
So when we're talking about
Those
sustaining,
teachers, too. But it's those, I'm just
we're talking about
categorized.
talking about sustaining innovation. We're talking about building innovative programs in our
I would
schools.
say sustaining democracy, not necessarily innovation.
Either. We can say either. If we have people who aren't passionate about what they do, or they're in the school building for the wrong reasons, then sustaining any worthwhile cause is not going to happen. Because why are they there?
All right, we are, I'm going to go like 5 over, because I'm at the podium.
So why did you ask?
It was in the middle of the question. I was like, Deb Meier said I could be a leader. So here's my question, as a closing piece from each of the 4 of you. We've got this audience from around the country right now. What's one thing that folks could go home and do? What's an action? Because we've talked a lot about systems, and sometimes systems can seem really big because they can be really big. And we started with overthrowing the government, so maybe we could get a little more practical. What's a piece from each of you that you would say, if you want to make some kind of change that we've been talking about today, what's a thing folks can do?
Well, I think you could start the conversation about, if we claim that democracy is worth dying for, and we want this country to remain a democracy, why is it that this school is not one? It would be far easier, more simpler to imagine how to create a democratic school than a democratic country. So I would start that discussion just. Why have we accepted that schools aren't democratic institutions? If the purpose of school, and of course maybe this is the first thing, is to discuss the purpose of school, but if the purpose of school is to produce a society in which everybody is part of the ruling class, why isn't everybody part of the ruling class of this school?
Okay, you guys are on me. Okay.
It's on anybody.
Derek, you look like you were ready to go.
No, please.
No,
No, I'll go.
go ahead.
I'll just mess around. Go ahead, Sam. I'll just mess around.
In terms of taking positive steps, as I said, we've got to think more creatively about the master schedule. We've got to do more of that performance-based assessment. We've got to make the teacher's lounge a special place. And the 4th thing I would just say, finally, is we have to read widely and carefully to be more aware of these bigger problems. And I think it doesn't necessarily mean that we'll change anything tomorrow by reading widely, looking abroad, for example, at other countries for perspective, but it does open our eyes so we can think about these things more soberly.
I would say act with some intentionality. So if we see an issue with our master schedule, then get some purpose, get some fire, and make something happen. Don't just complain. Bring something constructive to the table. No, drive, not bring. Drive the change that needs to happen. If our math department needs to do more, whatever, PBLs or whatever, let's not complain. Let's just act with intentionality. if we're not doing a great job responding to our 7th grade African American girls or our Hispanic boys school-wide, or if we're marginalizing some voices, act with some intentionality. And if we don't have the resources, reach out to our PLN, reach out to someone, find some good resources, and make some things happen. We sit quiet for too long, when we don't act with intentionality, we don't get hurt, kids get hurt. That's the problem.
I'm with Derek on that one. On an individual level, we need to make a choice. Be deliberate, be connected, and be courageous.
So we're going to thank our panel in a second, but this is democracy. So what are you going to do? So on your way to whatever conversation you're about to go to right now, turn to the people who are walking with you and say, here's the thing I'm committing to do. What's the action step you're going to take? How are we all going to do it? Maybe not in the conversation, but when I get back home, and maybe do something like, and here's my email address. Would you email me in 2 weeks and say, hey, how you doing with that? Because it is about network. This is a good place to start one. If you would please give a round of applause to our panel.
Oh my God.
Maybe we should stand up too.
That's right, that was pretty cool.
So we're gonna, I know that as that kind of goes, everybody tries to get out, and a lot of folks have to travel and all the rest. We're gonna start our next panel, our next session, excuse me, at 10. Really? I can't? Really? I need them, okay. No.
You got to make it through the day.
All right, we're going to start at 10:45. Lunch is only a half an hour on Sunday already, but we will scale it back 10 minutes, and then we'll shave 5 minutes, so all of the sessions will be 85 minutes long. Let's just try to make sure that we end by 4 o'clock, because I know people do have planes, trains, and automobiles to be able to be back at work Monday morning to do this work. I just want to echo what Zach said. Thank you all. This was, in 10 years, this was, I think, the best panel we've ever had. So thank you all so much.